This episode is sponsored by Kendo UI. Kendo UI allows you to build better apps faster. They have a comprehensive library ranging from data grids and charts to buttons and sliders. Plus, you can use their components as plain JavaScript as well as in Angular, React, and Vue. They have a large collection of customizable popular themes like Bootstrap and Material. Go check them out at javascriptjabber.com/KendoUI. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Views on Vue. This week on our panel we have Fritz.
Hi.
Divya Sasidharan.
Hello.
I always feel weird like I'm blowing it when I say your name. Sorry.
I think it's Sasidharan.
It's Sasidharan. Yeah.
Sasidharan.
Yes.
I think I need to just write that down. Erik Hanchett.
Hello.
And then we have Joe Eames.
Hey, everybody.
I just saw a random space that said Joe on it, and I'm like, Joe. I'm having a rough day, folks. I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv, and this week we have a few special guests. We have Tracy Lee.
Hi, everybody.
Ben Lesh.
Hello.
And Jay Phelps.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
Now, we're going to be talking about reactive programming in Vue, and there are so many places to start, but I'm going to start us off by talking about RxJS, specifically RxJS 6, which was released not that long ago. So do you want to talk briefly about the differences there and what that means to people?
Sure, I can answer that. So RxJS 6 was released a few months ago. The primary differences are that it is moving towards the Pipeable Operators. Those were actually released in 5.5. So there were really kind of two ways to use operators. One was dot-chained, where you're adding methods to observable, and the other is Pipeable Operators, where you're actually taking these functions and kind of composing them with the pipe method on observable. And we're moving towards that because there's a lot of benefits for better tree shaking. It's a lot easier for people to make their own custom operators and things like that. So overall, it's a big win as far as application size goes in particular. So we're moving towards that in RxJS 6. And then if you want to update to RxJS 6, but you don't have time to go through and update all of your dot-chained operators that you're using from RxJS 5, there's an RxJS-compat package you can just install and it magically works. The only other major breaking change in 6 to talk about would be that the error handling has changed slightly for edge cases where people are synchronously throwing errors. Before, it would synchronously just rethrow the error, and that caused some pretty nasty bugs that would be a little bit too in-depth to talk about right now. But what it does now is it actually rethrows the error on a different call stack. So you still see the error reported, but it doesn't cause the crazy bugs. So that's the only breaking change that some people have to work around, and usually that manifests itself in broken tests. So somebody is like saying, "I expect this to throw." That actually is the only place that I've really seen people have issues when they're updating.
I'm actually curious, could we take a step back for a moment and just explain to people who have never heard of like RxJS, like what is this thing?
Sure.
It's hot pink. It has a logo. It's an electric eel.
Nice.
Those are all the important parts.
All I need to know. Obviously, I need it in my application.
Sometimes when you go to sushi restaurants, the fish thing that they have kind of looks like an RxJS logo.
I believe they made the fish after RxJS, right? Like it was designed after the library.
Go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
No. I was gonna let you or Jay take this one because I answer this one all the time.
I'll let Jay take it since I did the main explanation.
Sure. Well, I mean, RxJS is just it's a lot of things to a lot of people. So because it can do a lot of things. The quick like elevator pitch is always that it's like Lodash for async, so it's like a utility library to better handle your very complex asynchronous stuff. But it's super oversimplifying it because you can do a lot of things synchronous and it's really, you can use it a little bit like you would use like a Lodash library, like in the sense of you can use it just to make your AJAX requests and have a nice cancelable primitive for canceling or aborting your AJAX. Or you can go full on and like write a majority of your business logic in RxJS. And there's the whole methodology with RxJS is like this reactive programming. which if you're familiar with data flow programming, it's actually very, very similar. It's like the yin to the yang type of thing. But it's kind of hard to explain verbally. The big thing is that you're going to have it's very declarative, and it really goes all in on the functional programming style of doing things. So you have things they call operators, which are just functions that you compose together. Things like map, filter, reduce, the things you'd be familiar with in your arrays, but instead of dealing with a set that is finite, like 0 through 8, like in an array, you have a stream. So you're dealing with things that could be like a stream could never emit, or it could emit one item, or it could emit for forever, for infinitely emit and never terminate. And that's the beauty of a stream, is that it's infinitely flexible. So I think that's the quick pitch. Ben, or Tracy, do you have anything you want to add?
I would add that it's if you think about RxJS, it's actually the most popular and well-known reactive programming paradigm. So I think it's up to 8 million downloads a month if you look at both RxJS 4 and 5/6 packages.
Actually, there's been a weird uptick recently. Mm-hmm. It's down to 8 million. It's up to 8 million a month just with RxJS 5 by itself.
Yeah,
wow.
And then
people
if you
weirdly like you, huh?
Weird.
It's pretty strange.
And if you look at RxJS 6 or 5 and up, what do we say now? 5 and up, 6 and up?
I guess 5.
Whatever it is, 5 and up. It's actually the reference implementation to the TC39 observable proposal. That's still at stage 1.
So to explain what we're talking about here, there was Microsoft started RxJS ages ago, and they published an NPM package, Rx, just Rx, and it still exists. And that went up to version 4. And then starting with version 5, it became an open source community effort that wasn't really owned by any company. And that's when I started working on it. And it has been 5 and 6, and that's published as RxJS on NPM. So whenever you're talking about the numbers of how many people are using Rx, there is how many people are using RxJS and how many people are using Rx, the package, which is the version 1 through 4. So there's still a little bit of confusion around that. Everyone should be using RxJS now that they're doing something new. The numbers on the old Rx are kind of just steady, presumably apps that have existed for a long time or are in a maintenance state that keep using old Rx.
And Ben, how does Vue Rx fit into it all?
So Vue Rx is a library that's actually maintained by the Vue community, the Vue org on GitHub. It is a set of pretty interesting adapters for dealing with observables more ergonomic in Vue.
I've used it without Vue Rx though, and it's worked pretty well. I love the idea that it's just if most of your application logic is in RxJS, written in RxJS, you can I've basically just copy pasted my Angular app into a Vue app and been done with it. It's taken maybe about half an hour to do.
Right.
Still demo app.
So, yeah, you definitely don't need to use Vue Rx if you're using RxJS with Vue. What Vue Rx adds is some helpers to get streams of events from user interactions or to subscribe to observables and kind of manage your subscriptions for you. So that it's just kind of a set of helpers around common tasks that you might have to do with RxJS, and it's a pretty small library.
I see it exposes VM.$observables, so you can do stuff like that.
Yeah. So honestly, I don't have a ton of experience with that other than today, I actually submitted a PR to Vue Rx to update it to version 6 because I had been CC'd on another PR by John Lindquist, who had gone about updating some things, and I had some of my own ideas about how it should probably be updated that were different. So there's 2 PRs out there. Should take mine. No, John's a great guy.
I think we might. By the time people are listening to this, that should probably be merged.
Great. Yeah. So it's there should be some good bundling benefits to updating that to version 6. But yeah, so most of my experience with the Vue Rx library has been going through and grokking the code. Which is kind of funny. I was joking with my friend Rob Wormald today because I'm on the Angular team. So I used an hour of my time to contribute to Vue, of course, because that makes total sense for someone on the Angular team to be doing.
We help each other out.
Right.
It's friendly.
Yep. So rising tide and all.
Hey, can we take just a little bit of a step back into the basics of RxJS and kind of, I think one of the interesting questions to sort of field out and address is if someone were to say, well, isn't RxJS just a more complex form of promises?
Oh, yeah. So
yeah, I actually have an example that I could throw out there that could give you like a what if, like why would I use Rx instead of promises in this case?
Okay, cool. Let's do it.
So let's say I have like a post comments component, and in my post comments component, I'm fetching a bunch of comments. So that's, one API call. And then for each comment, I want to like make another API call to fetch the user that made that comment so that I can like show some user information beside that. And let's say like, I don't have access to this API to, just get that information like all together. I can't design a new endpoint or something. So I have to do this kind of like inefficient process of like 30 different API calls, for like 30 comments and then like one user for each comment. And I'm using promises for that,
Yeah.
I go through and iterate through each one and I get a user for each one. And then when all of those are done, maybe I'll use promise.all. Then I'll set all my data.
Right.
So like it's already working with promises. Like why would I use RxJS? What value does that bring?
You don't have to use RxJS, but so there is some value to this. For one, you can compose exactly the same behavior that you talked about with promises with observables, and it wouldn't actually even look that much different. You could also have your results stream out individually and update your view a little bit faster for people if you wanted. Arguably, you could probably do that with promises too. But one big thing is if you go and you make a request with a promise, and then that's feeding into another call that's going to return a promise. So let's say you have 30 promise resolutions pending, and then the user's like, I don't like this page, I'm leaving. Then you have these 30 requests that are going to come back. All of whatever the HTTP logic that you're dealing with is going to resolve these promises, execute a bunch of code, probably allocate a whole bunch of objects that it thinks that you're going to want, and then decide. Then it's going to realize, oh, I'm not using any of these objects, and then it's going to block your thread to garbage collect all of them. So you have this whole massive bit of kind of inefficiency that's involved there. The thing about observables is observables are they're lazy, and when you subscribe to them, they give you back this subscription object that allows you to cancel the subscription by calling unsubscribe. And when you cancel that subscription, it's actually going to go in, and every observable implementation of an AJAX request works this way. It's going to go in and call abort on the underlying XHR, which tells the browser to just drop the responses when they come back from the server and not execute any more JavaScript and not allocate anything else that you need to garbage collect. So you get a good deal of efficiency out of it. So I would say that Promise's best use case is probably AJAX requests, but unfortunately, it's not totally adequate for it because you cannot cancel it, and frequently you don't care about the response of an AJAX request if you navigate away from a page before it's done coming back. So it's hit or miss whether or not a promise is great or not great in those situations. Now, RxJS has a lot of interoperability with promises. So if you have an API that returns a promise to something, you can use it just as you'd use an observable in any of RxJS's APIs. Like anything that accepts an observable as a return value in RxJS will also accept a promise. It just coerces it for you. You still can't cancel the promise because promises are not cancelable. But if you're using Rx, it's not going to. Using promises in different parts of your library isn't really going to impede you very much, other than maybe confusing a few folks that have to mentally jump between observables and promises.
So let's say this API supports WebSockets, and it allows me to do things like stream in users or stream in comments, like one comment at a time, so that I don't have to wait for all the comments to be delivered and to be like fetched and stuff like that. in order to start working with them. And you talked about like observable streams before. Like, is there any connection here? Like,
yeah. I mean, this the general type that you'd want for something like that would be an observable. So here's one of the things about promises people don't often think about, and it's because it's kind of the underbelly of coding, and no one really wants to think about it. But error handling. If you are dealing with callbacks, you get this thing called callback hell, and everybody just thinks, oh, it's this big, huge V of code and it's awful. That's not actually the biggest problem with callback hell. Usually the problem is error handling, where, if there's 7 different steps in your asynchronous thing where there's a callback inside of a callback inside of a callback, and the third step has some failure, but you need to pass that failure along to some render step that exists in that 7th step, then you're into some functional programming nightmare of trying to get that over there. So promises were great because they flattened all that out. You have 2 communication channels. You have a communication channel for a resolved value. That's what most people deal with. Then this, then this, then this, then this. And then there's another channel that if there's an error, will pass your error along. So there's like basically 2 wires that you've wired up. And you can add a catch anywhere down at the end of that chain, and it'll catch an error no matter how high up the chain it came from. So you've got these 2 different channels. Now observables, and then that solves the problem of trying to deal with errors happening in the middle of your asynchronous composition. Observables have the same thing, where observables have a next channel, which is each emitted value. There's a completion channel to tell you when the observable is done. But there's also an error channel that'll tell you, hey, the source here has an error, send it along. So you're able to send errors along as well. So if you're dealing with a type or a thing where you've got streaming values from a WebSocket.
Sorry, quick question. So you mentioned next, complete, and error. So next, that would be, in this case, like whenever like a new comment or a new user like is emitted?
Yes, correct.
And then complete is when like all the users or all the comments are done. Would that be right?
Complete. It depends on your implementation. Yeah, that could be it. You could group them in that way, or maybe complete comes from whenever the server just tells you it wants to close the WebSocket.
Got it. Whenever it's done sending information.
Yeah, it could be however you want to implement it. You could do that.
Okay, and you can't do that with promises. You just get like with the one resolve.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
when everything is
good for things that it's only one value. It's always in the future. It can't be synchronous.
And that one value you're always going to get all at once.
Yeah, you're the one value you're going to get it. So promises, that's one thing about promises. Another thing that's kind of interesting that people don't often think about with promises is promises are eager. So when you get a promise, it's going to be it's whatever's happening that's going to get you the value has already been triggered by the time you have a promise. So it's guaranteed to like give you this value at some point. But since they're eager, every time you have a promise, it's usually coming from a function. So you have to wrap every promise in a function. And the reason that everyone wraps promises in functions is because what they really wanted is they wanted it to be lazy. Nobody really realizes this. They just do it because it's a common pattern. They have a function that returns a promise. They have a function that returns a promise. You never just have a promise sitting around. Very, very rarely anyways. Where observables are lazy. So you don't need functions to return observables all the time. You can just have an observable that sits there and waits for you to subscribe to it. So it's kind of like, interesting. Yeah.
So observables like only start working when you subscribe?
That's correct. They're basically, you can think of them like functions. That functions don't do anything unless you call them. Observables don't do anything unless you subscribe to them.
That makes sense.
In the same way that like if you call a function multiple times, let's say you call a function and inside that function it allocates some memory. If you call that function multiple times, each person who called that is going to get their own separate memory. And observables work the same way. Like if you subscribe to the exact same observable, multiple people do that. They're all getting their own subscription, their own implementation of that running observable, for lack of a better term. So if that observable was like a WebSocket, and you subscribed, multiple times, you would theoretically open multiple web.
Yeah, which again depends on the implementation of the observable.
Some observables that are a little more intelligent, and they'll, like the WebSocket example, they're like the built-in WebSocket helper for RxJS will share the underlying single WebSocket so that multiple WebSockets don't get open.
So if we need several things from the WebSocket, like they can be merged, sort of?
Yeah, you can do. This is a more complex topic, but it just goes to show what RxJS can do. But there's something called multicasting and bi-directional multiplexing over WebSockets, and they're big words, but they're very useful terminology if you are doing and solving these problems. And so like that kind of like RxJS is really great as just a fundamental primitive for like making AJAX requests, right? But it is a little bit overkill if you're trying to learn all of the different operators and paradigms. But for a lot of real world complex apps, RxJS is just going to really shine once you get over that hurdle and learn it. Basically, some of the harder problems, it shines the most, whereas some of the easier problems, it can be a little too much learning. That example with the promises, like doing it the promise way with like maybe the fetch API, totally fine. And if that's like the most complex thing in your app, learning RxJS might not be worth the effort. I mean, we're biased, so we're probably going to say it is worth the effort just because we know it and we love it. So Ben kind of alluded to the fact that Angular. I know this is a Vue podcast, but just to show you that RxJS is not specific to any one library, it's a great skill to learn. Angular doubled down on RxJS, and it's kind of hard to, I would say, for most people, writing an Angular app means also learning RxJS. You don't have to necessarily be an expert at it, but learning the fundamentals of subscribe and unsubscribe and stuff like that. So it's a skill that when the new hotness UI framework comes out, it's a very transferable skill. It will continue with you in your career. So I do recommend it.
I would also say that we've seen a lot of people when they're trying to migrate their applications, let's say to Vue from, AngularJS to Vue, they'll stick all their business logic in RxJS before they port it over. So it's I think a lot of large companies are actually starting to do that and sort of use RxJS like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we joke that, why learn promises? Why not just learn RxJS? But
right.
So I think promises are a lot easier, but yeah, Rx is like way more powerful. Whenever I have a bunch of asynchronous operations that need to like interact and depend on each other, I always reach for RxJS. It does take a little bit of a learning curve, so I am hesitant sometimes to introduce it into a team, just if we're going to do a simple fetch from an API, then it's maybe a little bit overkill, especially if you can rely on fetch, which doesn't even need like a library.
So here's a fun fact about observables that a lot of people always they talk about how promises are simpler. I think the promise API is obviously simpler because there's fewer points to the API.
Yeah, less you can do.
Right. But you can actually build a promise from observables, and you can't do that the other way around. Like you can literally build a promise using Rx to build the promise API if you wanted. So that it's kind of a weird thing to think about. And the thing that is interesting is, so if you have an observable and you subscribe to it, when you subscribe, people generally pass 3 functions, but you can also just pass an object, which is called an observer. And the observer has a next method, an error method, and a complete method. And they map 1-to-1 with the 3 functions that you would normally send in there. And the reason for that is we take those 3 subjects and we scrub them into an observer object. When you take those 3 functions, they basically just wrap it into an observer object, and we pass it to the body of the observable. The observable itself is really just a function. Like it's literally a function that takes this observer object that has a next, an error, and a complete on it. And that's all. So if you imagine just having a function that only took that, and all the things you can do with that shape of function, like it's a function. You can do anything you want with a function. You could, new up a WebSocket, or you could close an app, or whatever you want to do. You can wrap that in an observable. And the interesting thing is that observables then, when you subscribe to them, since they're executing a body of a function in order to set up observation and start pumping values out of themselves, they also have this teardown semantic with unsubscribe, where they can kind of tear down the thing that you set up when you subscribed. So they embody the setup and teardown of any resource and all the values that come out of those resources, including errors if they happen. So that can pretty much represent anything you could possibly think of in programming, really, which is one of the reasons why it's so easy to do things like take an Angular JS app and literally just move all of the business logic into a reactive sort of paradigm. Or maybe you do it with like a Redux pattern and then like Redux Observable or something like that, and then take it and then move it over to some other framework. Because at that point, you're just using the frameworks as rendering layers, right? And it doesn't matter where you've moved it to. You have these things that are all the same shapes, like Lego bricks, that when you subscribe to them, they set up whatever it is that is going to produce data, be it user events or WebSockets or whatever, or animations even. And then when you unsubscribe from it, tears those things down, and they're all the same shape, and you can combine them in whatever way you choose. And the real thing that I think people find difficult is all the operators. The operators, they have kind of obtuse names like switch map and things like that. And it's if you're not used to reading it, there's some difficulty there because it's a specific vernacular on top of JavaScript that you end up having to learn. But once you have that vernacular, all of a sudden you have this really powerful set of tools to write concise code that can do an awful lot of stuff. Almost anything really. So
then you're saying you could take an observable and make it a promise. Like you can pipe to promise to it and make it tenable, but you can't take a promise and then make it observable. Is that what you just said?
Not quite. I mean, you can take a promise and convert it to an observable. But I mean, like you could literally build your own promise library out of observables.
And he's saying he will not touch the window.promise object at all, because the toPromise does do that. It just uses the promise, the built-in promise, and then wraps that. He's saying that like you could do your own async scheduling like a promise does, and you could make your own class promise and then use observable under the hood to power that. So you're actually creating a promise, like the actual implementation of it.
That's right.
Okay.
For example, in case you don't like the way that promise.all works, or is it promise.all? Is it promise.race? I think one of them, if it's past an empty array, then it never resolves.
I didn't know that.
I think with promise.all, it just never resolves if it's past an empty array. So you better hope, you better pass at least one dummy promise to it.
That's wonderful.
Just one promise.resolve.
That's funny.
Or else you'll be wondering why nothing is happening.
This episode is sponsored by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is the hosting provider I use for devchat.tv. I also use it for my applications that manage the RSS feeds, scheduling, and sponsorships involved in delivering these shows. DigitalOcean is easy to use, has data centers all over the world, and provides terrific services including server hosting and object storage for delivering your web applications and assets quickly and easily. I use DigitalOcean because I love their interface. I get SSD storage for my servers, and their support replies quickly. So go check them out at digitalocean.com.
Yeah, I would think that it...
So with RxJS, you could rewrite your own promise.all.
Yeah, you could write. I mean, that's specifically. I'm sorry if that was confusing at all. I was specifically saying you could create your own, like RSVP or Bluebird type library using Rx as the engine that powered the promise you created.
Well, it's so funny, right? Because I think a lot of times, especially when I'm pairing with Ben and Jay, we do things and we're like, let's implement the Redux pattern in RxJS, which is kind of what NGRX in the Angular community was, right? Just a Redux pattern implemented in Rx. But I think, it's also kind of interesting because a lot of people think it's just for asynchronous things, and they don't realize that, you can use it for synchronous things as well. And you're not, Ben and I run Rx Workshop, and we were very surprised when RxJS core team people came and just went to the workshop to hang out, really. But they actually learned a lot, because typically you're only using Rx for one specific portion of your application or one specific use case, and you don't realize all the different things you could potentially do.
Right.
And a lot of times... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say you can use RxJS as a transducer library if you want. That's one kind of weird use case for it, where you have an array of things and you don't want to do map, filter, reduce with the array because you don't want to allocate the additional arrays in there. You just want them to, do each step individually. RxJS actually functions decently as a transducer library to do stuff like that. So that way it does, your filter step and then your map step and then your reduce step and then produces, the additional array or value or whatever you're trying to do.
So you could actually get some like performance improvements for synchronous operations in some cases.
Yeah, you can. The use case around that would be if you had very large arrays with very large objects in it. Mm-hmm. If you just have like your standard, I've got an array of numbers or something. Yeah, array filter map reduce is going to be way faster than using Rx for that sort of thing. But if you have very large arrays of very large objects where you'd have to allocate and garbage collect for each step, then it's going to be a little bit faster to use RxJS.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, like, if there are, like a lot of synchronous code has the potential to become asynchronous, like at any given moment, like in different combinations. So let's say like you have two functions that you want to call, and both of these functions are synchronous, but one function takes longer than the other. If you want to know when both of those are done, like you kind of have to like do something asynchronous.
Right. Or the other case is, well, you got it both directions too. So let's just say that you have some data that you're currently loading synchronously from some array of data, but you at some later point want to be able to load it via like an AJAX call or something like that. Then you can actually, if it's an observable, then it doesn't even matter. It's just an implementation detail. Like if you have a function that accepts an observable and then subscribes to it and does something with the data, then it doesn't matter if that data arrives synchronously or it arrives asynchronously, because the observable can handle both cases.
Beautiful. So it just kind of future-proofs things.
Yes.
I love that word. Future-proof.
Yeah. For people who might not be familiar with it, what I mean when I say future-proof is just mean you have to do less work later.
Right. So that's actually a reactive programming
now, so that you can work like not as much later.
So that's one thing we haven't talked about, is actually just that's what reactive programming kind of helps you do. So we didn't really talk about reactive programming as a higher level concept, and what that really boils down to is kind of doing things in steps, where each step gets a piece of data and it doesn't care where it came from and does something with it, and then passes it along to the next step. And when you've got observables, like each operator, so if I map an observable, it returns a new observable. If I then filter that observable, it returns a new observable. You see, like each step the filter doesn't really care that it was mapped beforehand. It just cares that, I've got an observable, I'm going to subscribe to it and filter it and return this new observable. So each individual piece is responsible for reacting to data that arrives to it, right? So it's kind of like reactive programming in a nutshell. And what you end up with is this step-by-step, very declarative sort of thing, where you could like add another filter in between two other filters and it would change the behavior slightly. That's kind of what reactive programming is about. So it helps future-proof
reactive programming. Sorry.
I was just going to say it helps future-proof things, because everything's kind of broken down into smaller steps. Go ahead, Jay.
Oh yeah, sorry, I must have cut out. So I always give the example when trying to explain a reactive programming of Microsoft Excel, because most of us are familiar with entering in some sort of equations, even simple ones in Microsoft Excel. If you say like C equals A plus B, if you change the value of A or B, C automatically updates, right? It doesn't care how A or B got updated. It just automatically recomputes the value of C. And that's reactive programming at its fundamental core. And you can do that same behavior in RxJS. Except it's not as simple as far as the DSL of just saying like C equals A plus B.
Yeah, and Vue can offer the same kind of benefit in that kind of scenario, but yeah, it definitely doesn't offer the full power of RxJS.
When I was looking at giving a talk on reactive programming, I was looking in the Vue community and trying to figure out where I saw sort of like reactive programming paradigms. And of course, with Vue Watchers, Sarah Drasner pointed out that, this was a really cool way we sort of saw that implemented. But, what can we do to help get more reactive programming paradigms implemented in Vue? Maybe you guys want to have RxJS as a dependency?
I think I can safely say that I don't think that'll ever happen. Simply because there are so many different use cases that people are using Vue for, and for a lot of those use cases, RxJS isn't something that's necessary. And right now, at least, maybe, and I hope this will change in the future. Right now, it's not something that everybody knows. It's something that a relatively small percentage of programmers know, even though it's so powerful. And so like being able to integrate it easily is definitely something that's important to us. But I don't think we need to make it a dependency if things can work without it.
And Vue has phenomenal support for observables, and especially with that add-on. If you compare it to something like React, where there's no first class like support for any kind of observable primitive or something like that, there's been a lot of discussions, and in fact, they use the Vue Rx library as an example of something that they might do, where you have that subscriptions callback or subscriptions function that gets called to manage your subscriptions for you. But at least at this time, there's no plans for React to first class it.
Unlike Angular, which it's first class. And you said in the latest Angular CLI and Angular 6 comes with RxJS 6, right?
Yeah. The actual CLI itself is written with, I think, more Rx than I've seen pretty much anywhere, because their whole build process is very reactive. But
right.
I would say that, if you look at the places inside of Angular that are actually using Rx, most of it is areas like specialized functionality, like the router, for example, or and I think that's actually due for some updates that are probably going to make it more reactive, I would guess. Or form validation is another area where they used a lot of Rx. But if you look at the actual core library, like if you were to go into Angular and just build Hello World app or like a to-do app or something like that, you could do it without Rx, and the bundle that it would ship would have like little to no Rx in it. So it just all depends. I think that if someone was to write, someone could write like a slightly better improved reactive Vue router or something like that could have Rx as a dependency. But the Vue core library itself, I would see little reason to use something like Rx in that, right? Like there's with frameworks, typically there's like a rendering layer, and I don't feel like Rx has a lot of business in the rendering layer aspect of it. Other than, maybe the rendering layer supporting subscribing to observable types, which doesn't really require Rx as a library. It just requires knowledge of an API.
Great. So one word that we've used a lot today is reactive. And Vue has a quote unquote reactivity system. And the React library has React in its name. So like people are like, is that reactive? Like reactive can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I imagine this is something that you all probably get questions about a lot. Like what exactly is like reactive, like reactivity? And what does it mean in the case of RxJS?
I like when people ask me if RxJS is like React, if it's the same thing. I get that question more often than you could imagine.
And is it?
Sure. No, not really. So I think I was talking about this a little while ago. Just a few minutes ago, I was talking about what reactive programming really is. Really, if you have a system or a piece of an application that just kind of blindly reacts to the arrival of data, like it gets some event, data arrives, and then it does something with it and passes it along as an event to the next piece in the system, that's reactive programming. And that's kind of RxJS's wheelhouse. But that can exist in a lot of other shapes, like the watchers in Vue or computed properties in Ember. Those are things that all have similar things where there's somebody updates something and that triggers events to be fired that says, hey, something's updated. And in those cases, I believe then someone's required to pull the data through in it. And when they pull it, it goes through and runs a bunch of functions to compute those things, right? Like, so it's not like fully reactive, but it's certainly reactive in the regard that there's an event that fires that then notifies this other thing that it wants to get some data in it, and then pulls those things through a somewhat slightly more imperative for.
Vue is more push based. Like when it lets subscribers know when something that it cares about changes.
Right. So that's exactly what Ember does. In fact, and MobX is a very similar thing where they've got the idea is something, you set something, and with in MobX's case and in Ember's case, there's like a setter, and so you say set this property by some name, and here's the new value, and then it notifies down this chain that, hey, this has changed, and I know that you're waiting you want to read this data, and then the code that is subscribed to that says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and read that data. Redux works this way as well, where you dispatch an action, it goes through and updates the state, and then you subscribe and it says, hey, this is updated, but then you have to get the state out of the store, right? It's the same sort of paradigm. So you'll find this sort of pattern all over the place, and where it differs from Rx is just purely push-based. So every time there's an event, it pushes down and does the calculation, pushes down and does the calculation, and so on, where each step is not waiting for something to pull from it. It's pushing those things directly. And there's no right or wrong here. I mean, they're both, again, reactive to some degree. Like React is like, oh, I've updated state, I'm going to react to that by rendering, for example, or I've gotten new props, so I'm going to react to that by rendering. It's still, they're both reactive. I would just say that RxJS is more granular in its reactivity, and it's all push-based.
Great.
So I'd like to return back to the concept, can you hear me, about streams. And I was curious, if you were to use RxJS with Node, how does it work with like the Node's implementation of streams versus RxJS's implementation of streams?
So I imagine we can all probably talk on that. I'm just going to really briefly. So the main thing is just like different streams. There's no one size fits all, unfortunately. So like reading from a disk, like you would in Node streams, like you're doing some sort of I/O, you're going to want a more pull-based approach.
Cut out again, Jay.
Jay, you cut out after you're going to
pull-based approach.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll let Ben take it.
You guys just finish each other's sentences.
Yes. And each other's sandwiches.
Ooh, I won't go into that. I won't go into that.
No.
I'm sorry, I watched Tangled with my kids the other day. All right, so no, it was Frozen. That's from Frozen.
#Frozen.
All right.
Get it right, Ben.
Man,
Get it right, Ben.
Dad fail. So yeah, in Node and in backend services, you've got this idea where in the front end, you're the end of like the chain of data flow, like between different applications. So it just the data is coming in like a wave and just kind of crashing against the user, right? Like that's the end of your application chain. But
I like that metaphor.
in your back end, what you have is you've got data coming in one way in the form of requests, and then you're processing them somehow, and you're probably going off and making a call to some database, and you've got data coming in the other direction in the form of some response from the database, scrubbing it back, and then sending that along to the user. So you're kind of this middleman broker when you're in the back end usually. And backend processes, because of that, there's more of a push-pull sort of aspect to it, where the front end, you're just kind of pushing things at the user usually, or pushing things back at the server. In the middle tier, you've got this aspect of, I've got a request, I need to send a response. And so reactive programming in those sorts of scenarios, especially with the guaranteed responses, in a lot of cases in the request response type situation, a promise is probably a little bit better, because those are like non-cancelable events. Like if you get an HTTP request, you need to respond. You're not going to like cancel that on the user because of something. Now, if you have a different type of system where, let's just say you're aggregating, like say you're taking all the log files that you get, and you want to aggregate those real time. So you get some sort of stream to show like, here's like real time errors or something happening in a system. And this is actually something they did at Netflix. Then you want to try to process a stream of things as quickly as possible. And things like Rx can help you with that. So that how you would use Rx on like a node service would be something like saying, okay, well, I'm going to have this service publish events to some bus. And then you'd have a node service that read events off of that bus and reacted to them and said, oh, well, I've got all of these log events. I'm going to filter out just to the ones that are errors and pass that along to another service that is reading events from a bus that says, I'm only looking for error events. I'm going to take all those error events and aggregate them so I can get a count that I release once every 5 seconds in like some sort of way that things can tolerate, because 1 million notifications a second, hopefully there's not 1 million errors a second, but 1 million notifications a second is going to be too much for my UI to handle. So I'm just going to get some aggregation and send that along. And things like reactive programming is ideal for solutions like that, where, you know, your average imperative pull-based mechanisms are going to suck for that, because you'd have to pull or something like that. It's going to be pretty gross. So that's kind of how you'd end up using that. You can also do things where if you want to process records as fast as possible that are streaming in, you can have kind of the snake eating its own tail sort of design, where you have an RxJS subject, which is both an observer and an observable. And it, whenever a value comes out of that subject, you react to it by processing it in whatever way you need to. And then whenever it gets down to the end of that process, it actually nexts back into that subject and that requests another value, and it kind of just consumes itself over and over and over again. So you kind of get an endless cycle of work being done as fast as possible. So that's kind of another way to go about it. But there's other types that work really good for that like async iterators and that sort of thing. They're also reactive. I mean, technically, promises are a reactive type. So
is that endless cycle the dot snake eating its own tail method?
Yes,
is that how you call that?
Implement snake eating its own tail method. No, there actually is one operator in RxJS that does this for you to a degree, which is the expand operator. And what expand does is it's very much like a merge map, where you take a value and you map it into an observable. It then subscribes to that observable and pumps the values of that observable out. But it also takes those values and pumps them back into the same function that you use to map to a new observable. So it's recursive in that manner. So you can do some pretty nutty stuff with that, crawl asynchronous graphs and etc.
I think the latest Rx is pretty extensible, though, you said, right? So would I be able to make my own snake eating its own tail, like utility class or utility method?
Absolutely. You can build your own snake eating its own tail operator. It's a
cool,
pretty simple, just higher order function. You're good.
Nice. Look forward to that. You look forward to that pull request.
I'm
just kidding. I'll just keep it in userland. I'll publish my own library.
That's good.
I'll have a lot of cryptic ones. I want to do another one with like wave crashing against the sand.
Yes.
I think this utility like library collection will be called Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah, it's like the very poetic version of RxJS.
Yeah, it's like using poetic metaphors to explain things.
That's good. I like that.
So I've used Bacon.js previously. I've not used RxJS, but I've used Bacon.js for functional reactive programming. And I was curious, from your perspective, what you see the difference between Bacon.js and RxJS is, if you've used it, if you're familiar.
I'm familiar with it. So Bacon, it's been a long time since I've looked at it, honestly, but Bacon had a few differences. I feel like it didn't have the same sort of unsubscription mechanism as RxJS. I don't remember if it was forced multicast or not. I think that it may have been. So forced multicast basically means that everyone that subscribes to an observable gets the same subscription, basically. Like they share a subscription to a single thing. I would need to look at that. I know that there are some libraries. There's one that Andre Stelz wrote that's called Xstream, I think, which is like that. So there are some differences between RxJS and these other libraries. And I think the one that probably stands out the most is RxJS. RxJS is easily the most popular, but I think that's in large part because of the adoption of RxJS at some bigger companies and the efforts to try to standardize an observable type that looks a lot like RxJS is observable. I mean, other than that, what they're all doing under the hood is ridiculously similar. I mean, they usually have three communication channels. there's usually some sort of cancellation. They're all great. Most.js is another really good one. Kefir is another one. All great libraries, all do very similar things. All of them actually have interop with RxJS also, which is something that I helped work on a few years ago.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean they have interop with RxJS?
So any object that implements a method on symbol.observable. So if you have symbol observable polyfilled and you put a property on an object with symbol.observable that is a function that returns basically an RxJS shaped observable, RxJS will be able to convert that to an RxJS observable with from, or any method actually that you could normally return an observable. Likewise, most.js I know for a fact does it, and Bacon and Kefir does it as well. You could take any object that had symbol observable and just convert those to those observable types as well. So that's what I mean by interop. There's a little known feature on Redux. A Redux store actually implements symbol observable. So you can take a Redux store and use RxJS as from, and just make a stream of state from a Redux store directly by just converting it. So that's what I mean by interop.
Cool. I think I've been pronouncing it wrong because I've been pronouncing it Kefir. I think this might be another plot moment. You say Kefir too?
Well. Yes.
Oh, wow, I'm not probably wrong this time.
I'm probably wrong. Nobody told me how to pronounce that. I just pulled that out of my butt. So
For Kefir, but anytime Chris pronounces something, it's committed.
I assume it's wrong anytime I pronounce something differently.
No, you're the first person that said pois to me, and it's pois.
Has it caught
Nobody
on?
should ever say PWA anymore.
Are other people saying that now?
I'm saying it. I tell everybody to say it.
Pois? And you should look at them. You should look at them wrong when they say PWA, like in a shaming way. Like what?
What?
What are you saying?
Right.
No, you don't
PWA?
say.
You gotta
I don't
laugh.
think anyone has ever called it that.
And then you chuckle, right?
Yeah. Or you just say plow like a question after they say it. So
I
they'll say
work with
PWA
people.
and then you go plow.
I worked with people that called them.
Why on earth would you pronounce the letters of an acronym?
You want a La Croix with your La Croix?
That's pretty good.
See, you said La Croix. I'm like, LaCroix?
Oh,
I pronounce it LaCroix too, actually.
LaCroix?
Do people say
I just call it
LaCroix?
California water. I just call it
Or was the joke? Oh no, I think you
That was the joke.
told a funny joke, and then I didn't get it because I wasn't. I needed to catch up. Okay.
It won't load unless you go to the right URL.
Right, Earl. Yes.
Yep.
Go to the Earl. Lol.
Does that mean that
All
we're
right.
done talking about serious stuff?
Probably.
Well, does anyone else have any questions about observables or reactivity? Doing this cool asynchronous stuff in Vue.
Well, if you want to learn about RxJS, you can always come to Rx Workshop. Ben is giving all of his proceeds from Rx Workshop to different not women who code specifically, but like, how do we say it?
This time it
Nonprofits
is
that
Women
help.
Who Code. This time the charity is Women Who Code. So different charities every time. And usually focused on underrepresented groups. So
Yes.
not
That's
just
rad.
ladies,
So-
but any underrepresented group.
So where and when for these workshops?
The next one
June
is
9th.
Yeah, next one's June 9th, but they happen kind of on a quarterly basis. And they're framework agnostic, so you can come and, you can, if you're doing Vue or anything else exciting, you can just learn Rx with us.
On a quarterly basis, but it could stop at any time, so people should jump on it right away, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We also do private trainings as well for like your company if your whole team wants to learn or something like that. And we do one-on-one pairing and mentoring and stuff like that. We all work together. Tracy, Ben, and I on this dot project. It's a this dot company. Ben works at Google still full time, and Ben and I met at Netflix when we worked together previously. But that's how we all know each other.
Yes. And then somehow we're all talking about Rx.
And this dot helped us, or actually, really, when I say helped us, I mean did almost all of the work for planning Vue contributor days, which will have happened by the time this comes out, but has not yet happened. So we can't tell any like funny stories about it or anything like that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
About how everybody fell asleep 2 hours in.
We did Rx contributor days a while ago, and it was very productive. I liked it a lot. So
This will be our first, so I'm really excited about it.
the Angular team did one too, and there was a lot of really positive feedback from that.
Yeah, we're actually doing Angular contributor days tomorrow as well.
I wasn't invited.
I know. I'm sorry.
not on the Angular. Wait, I am on the Angular team.
I know. Why aren't you invited? It's so strange. I must not like you anymore.
I know.
It must be personal, yeah.
JavaScript is personal. Have you seen the Twitter outrages? What are they called? But
Mushgate.
Mushgate, yes. But Ben, the real question is: Are you going to rename? Have you gotten enough excitement to rename of to just?
I don't think so. It seems like there's an issue about renaming of to just, and the community is split on it. So I think we're just going to go with the status quo. So
observable.of, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, but it's not on observable anymore. You just use it directly because that's much more tree shakeable, right? Like it's
oh cool.
Make apps smaller. And some people didn't like of because they thought it was too ambiguous.
So it really is more Lodashy.
Yeah, everything's trying to be a lot smaller. So the Smushgate, I don't know if everyone here is familiar with the story, but the Smushgate thing has special meaning for me and maybe Jay a little bit too.
Oh, this is so funny.
So Jay and I concocted this really great idea that on April Fool's Day, we were going to publish a version of RxJS that renamed all the merge operators to variations of the word smush. So instead of like merge map, it was smush map and so on. And smush all, I think, was in there and all these other things. So,
oh my gosh, smush map, I want it.
Yeah. So we did this, and I published it under, because at the time we were still, RxJS 6 was still in beta, or just newly in beta. And I published it as RxJS 6.0.0-smush.1. And thinking like, okay, this is fine. I'm going to do that. Well,
thinking that people will get the joke.
Well, all right, so yeah. So the joke aside, so the joke part was well received and or confusing for people, which is fun. The problem was that if you publish a semantic versioning works as such, and nobody but I think Igor Minar knew this, at least amongst my group of friends. If you like semantic versioning accounts for like alphanumeric things like that dash beta or dash alpha afterwards isn't like a namespacing thing. It's actually alphanumeric. And it's just by virtue of the fact that beta comes after alpha that you'll pick up beta if you've done like caret 6000 alpha or whatever, right? So if you did caret 600-beta.1 and I publish 6000-smush.whatever,
oh no,
then you automatically get smush, right? So yeah, I broke the internet for like a minute. And the problem was that normally you can unpublish these things. However, RxJS falls under a special group of libraries on NPM that get special consideration in that so many apps depend on it that it gets picked up as a dependency very quickly within like seconds kind of thing. And therefore they can't unpublish it because they're worried about breaking other people. So that meant that I could not continue to publish beta, or I'm sorry, I was in release candidate. I could not continue to publish release candidates because they were alphanumerically before smush. Like I need to publish something with S or higher.
So it had to be a smush candidate.
Basically, I could have called it smush candidate. I ended up calling it things like tenacious and like other stupid words like that started with either S or yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. You can look in the changelog has the gory details, but let's see. It's starting with so it was RC0 and then right after that 6.0.0 dash tactical RC1 and then tenacious RC2, terrific RC3, turbo RC4, uber RC5. You can do it, RC6, uncanny RC7, and so on. Like, and eventually we got out to the release, but that was all my doing.
Well, thank God I was in release.
I blame Jay a little bit.
That's a mistake I could have made too.
blame Jay a little bit because he encouraged me. I don't want to have all the blame on me, but
at least you told him about the plan. You told Tracy. You might have told some other people about the plan, and none of them caught it. So I think at that point you're covered.
Yeah. So the only person that pointed out it was a problem was Igor Minar, who probably saved some people. Like, it might have taken me a day or two to realize that what kind of weird problem it was, but pretty ridiculous.
All right. Well, let's do some picks.
Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device, on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says "Pay me now." And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section.
Chris, do you want to start us off with picks?
Sure. I only have one pick today. It's a very special pick, like a very special episode. And that is back up your data more than weekly.
Oh, no.
If you have a backup system that you think like, oh yeah, I'm good. I do a full backup of everything weekly, and then like a backup of like a lot of other important stuff daily, you should be fine, right? Apparently not. Last night, I deleted all of my notes for like an important project that I've been working on, and it took me 2 days of work, like working like literally the whole day to compile those notes. And we'll see if I am able to recover them.
That's not good.
That's fun, huh? This project does have a deadline. So back up your data, everyone. Do we have a backup data sponsor? We can plug them right now if you want.
No, that was my first tech job out of college. It was Mosey.
Okay, well, use Mosey, use Backblaze, use literally anything to back up like more often. Yeah.
Do more things in the cloud.
Or do more things in the cloud. Just like don't own a computer that has a hard drive.
Well, I just switched from Google Drive to Google Drive Sync or whatever it's called. And I just started deleting things. And I probably should have only deleted one thing to see if that folder was deleted on the internet. And apparently when you delete it from your computer, it deletes on the internet too. So who knows what I've deleted? But I've deleted a lot of things that I'm pretty sure can't be recovered.
I've got some good news on that front because I've made the same mistake. I have the sync on my computer. It moves it to trash for 30 days. So if you go into Google Drive and you look at the trash, you should be able to recover it unless it's been too long.
Wow, thank you for that tip.
You are welcome. Divya, do you have some picks for us?
Yes, I also have one pick, and it is not a sad pick. It is an informational pick. When I was first introduced to reactive programming, I found this gist that Andre Stolz created called The Introduction to Reactive Programming You've Been Missing. Very useful. He explains things in extreme detail and includes diagrams, which makes it really easy for you to grok concepts that are, otherwise slightly complicated. So that's my pick.
Nice. Erik, what are your picks?
I got a Visual Studio Code extension called Bracket Pair Colorizer. So the extension allows matching brackets to be identified with colors. The user can define which characters to match and which colors to use. So it's just kind of a nice little extension for your Visual Studio Code. And
I love that. I use it too.
Yeah, it's great. And I got that from our friends at syntax.fm, Mr. Wes Boss and Scott Dolinsky, another great podcast out there if you guys are interested.
Yep, that's a good one. Joe, what are your picks?
All right. So I want to chime in here on the backup thing. I use Backblaze, and I really like it. So I'll plug them since it's a topical issue at the moment. I also went and saw Solo, and it was awesome. So if you haven't gone to see it, if you're holding out because it hasn't gotten the most amazing reviews, I still highly recommend that you see it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. And finally, just a reminder to everybody that the Framework Summit is coming up. I think we'll be selecting talks right about the time this comes out. So speakers and sessions should be published pretty shortly after that. Beautiful Salt Lake City, Park City, Utah, October 2nd and 3rd. Come and hang out and talk about Vue, learn about Vue. Do
we know some of the people who are going to be speaking yet?
Yeah, there's already a fairly large list of speakers that's been published. It's already on there, but the CFP hasn't finished up. It won't finish up till I think June 15th or so. And the selections will happen over the next week or something like that. But there's a fair amount of speakers already listed. You could head over to the frameworksummit.com and check out the amazing list of speakers. Probably the most amazing of the list would be our own Chris Fritz.
I don't think I can claim to be the most amazing. It's a pretty good lineup.
It is a pretty good lineup. So a lot of awesome speakers. It's such an amazing lineup that Chris Fritz is one of the pack. That's how amazing.
Really scraping the bottom. So it doesn't tell you much, but you know that people are going to be at least okay.
Right. No, I'm really excited. This is going to be a fantastic speaker lineup, and I'm so excited to see some of the amazing talk ideas that are coming out of it. So those are my picks.
All right. I guess I'll jump in with some picks real quick. My wife went out of town for a couple days, and so, of course, I had to make dinner. And I guess I should preface this pick by saying that my wife watches MasterChef Junior with my kids, and they really enjoyed it. So I'll pick that because it's kind of a fun show to watch, especially these little kids that are cooking these amazing meals. But also related to that, so I have an Instant Pot, and that's my other pick. And it does pressure cooking, slow cooking. It has a whole bunch of different cook settings on it. But I used the pressure cooker to cook some pork, and my 6-year-old said, Dad, MasterChef, the adult version, you should be on that. So you can make pretty good food with the Instant Pot. I'll just say that. Good enough for the adult version of MasterChef. Tracy, do you want to go next?
Yes, I'll chime in and say I love the Instant Pot, and I really don't like buying things unless you're talking about purses. Then we could be crap about that. But besides, and whiskey these days. Instant Pot is definitely, I bought it, and it's so life-changing because you can literally make dinner in 5 to 10 minutes, which is awesome. So I love it. I have a pick. My pick will be Beauty Fix, which is a subscription box. It's $25 a month, but men and women care about their skin, right? And so Beauty Fix is this great subscription box where it just gives you a bunch of like lotions and shampoos, and it doesn't give you makeup. And it gives you all these like really high-end brands. So I highly recommend it. And then my second pick is going to be Blanton's because I'm staring at 15 bottles of Blanton's I bought. So if you guys like Blanton's. So if y'all like whiskey and you're not in a heavily regulated state, you should go to your local liquor store and try to find some Blanton's and
Blanton's.
Pick some of it up, yes. And then you can drink it and say Blanton's like them.
Sorry, Tracy took me on this odyssey one time where she was trying to buy Blanton's everywhere, and the only thing I could do is to say Blanton's over and over again.
Yes, I spent 6 hours driving around California trying to find all the Blanton's. I found 15 bottles of Blanton's.
I think the problem was she said the word Blanton's like 15 times a minute, so I started saying Blanton's.
That's the bottle with the horse on it.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. I got my Blanton's.
Yep. Now every time you see it, you can think about me saying Blanton's. Because as I say it pretty much every time Tracy says Blanton's.
Nice. Ben, do you have some picks for us?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. So stuff I'm real excited about, the RxJS docs have been moved over to the new beta docs. We're still working on getting the domain pointed at it. But if you go to reactive.io/RxJS where the docs were, it now redirects you to some Firebase hosted docs that are being pulled directly from the documentation in the source finally. And there's kind of like one unified place for documentation. People have been working really hard on it. So the RxJS docs are probably my first pick. And then, if you get a little curious about what's coming up in the future, I'm also working on some cool stuff in the experimental branch on RxJS. If you want to go in and poke around, still experimental, nothing's written in stone, but the library is going to be a lot smaller and faster. And then finally, my final pick is I would encourage everyone to stop and take a break and get up and walk around and get some exercise. Go to the gym if they can. I go to the gym pretty much every day. I like it a lot. I think it improves my work, my daily work. So, and I don't think it gets talked about enough in tech that a lot of us are sitting around with weird shoulder and neck and back problems because we sit in chairs and work on code all day. So get up and get out and get some fresh air. That's probably my number one pick. That's the best advice.
And Ben is ripped and toned. Like you can't see it because this is an audio medium, but
it's not.
If you could.
It's not at all true.
Yeah, we remodulated his voice. He really sounds like this.
Right. I do sound like that a little.
It's so deep, like the human ear can't hear it. He has to use a special microphone.
All right. Well, if people want to stay up on RxJS or anything like that, where do they go?
If they want to stay up on it, the best thing you can do is follow all three of us on Twitter, _ Jay Phelps, at Ben Lesh, and of course at Lady Leap. Probably Tracy more than me because she's more of a Twitter bug than I am. Otherwise, the best resources are going to be at the documentation site or on the repository. I really encourage people to go and check out the issues and file issues and that sort of thing if they have questions or concerns. But yeah, the best place to be is probably the repository.
Especially for people who maybe are experimenting with Vue and RxJS after this podcast, getting on there and providing real world examples or links to blog posts or different things like that. We super welcome those types of things. And we need them. And you can look at the issues on GitHub or again, just ping me.
Sounds good. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we will catch everyone next week.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com